The NFL draft is almost upon us, so today I'm bringing you some must-stash players to add some depth, to add some upside at the end of your bench to help you win a Dynasty Fantasy Football Championship in 2025. If you like Dynasty Fantasy Football, hit that like and subscribe button as we are on the way to 20,000 subscribers here on the DLF YouTube channel. When we started off with player number 1, it is going to be Hollywood Brown for the Kansas City Chiefs. And was Hollywood Brown signed with the Kansas City Chiefs? Did he get all the hype last year and then all of that fizzled away with the injury and with him not playing until the last 2 games of the regular season? Correct. 9.1 fantasy points per game in the 2 games. And then if you take a look at his overall playoffs, 0 fantasy points versus Houston, 6.5 fantasy points versus Buffalo, and then in that Super Bowl, only 3.5 fantasy points. So like I said, I understand looking at fantasy points in the playoffs can kind of be different, but all in all, he really didn't perform, even though he had an above, right around a 69% snap share over those 3 playoff games. I understand saying to stash Hollywood Brown when you got Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and you don't even have the NFL draft yet, and there's a good chance that somebody comes available, whether it's through trade, whether it's them drafting somebody, in that 2nd, 3rd round range. I understand all of that, but I think Hollywood Brown in his career is somebody that has the big play upside. Let us not forget back in 2022. I know we got to go all the way back to 2022 to see a 13 fantasy point per game season at wide receiver 27. Year before that, wide receiver 21 on a fantasy points per game basis in 2021. So I understand that was earlier on in his career. Like we said, came into the league in 2019. So we're talking about going into year 7. A little bit of an older player in Hollywood Brown, being 27.8 years old, but he is still entering the prime of his career for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I understand there's a chance that he's washed. I understand he also ran a 4.32 coming into the NFL. And having a burner like this, we have seen guys like a Tyreek Hill absolutely crush it. I understand putting Tyreek Hill and Hollywood Brown in the same sentence. That is not what I'm trying to do to say that they're the same type of player. But Hollywood Brown was kind of talked about as the Lamar Jackson when he played for the Baltimore Ravens early on in his career, as that same type of player. Now, going from Baltimore to the Cardinals to now the Chiefs, it hasn't been, and he hasn't lived up to the full potential. I totally hear you. But at the end of my bench, I want guys that can absolutely go soaring up, keep trade cut rankings. And right now, at wide receiver 69, these are absolutely dead prices. I mean, going behind guys like a Christian Watson, a Trey Harris, who's going to be a second, late 2nd round pick in your rookie draft, to Tavion Wicks, ahead of guys like Jaden Higgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Demario Douglas. I think this is appropriate level of value for a guy like Hollywood Brown. But guys, I mean, you're really only going to, if you need to trade for him, he's probably worth an early 3rd, maybe even a mid 3rd. It might be on your roster anyway. I want to be stashing Hollywood Brown. I understand not seeing it in his first year with the Kansas City Chiefs. I understand we haven't really seen it in a few years, but I still want Hollywood Brown on my team because I still do think the measurables, he's entering into the prime of his career, even if he is just a burner, and we don't want to see him get to the age of 30. We're still looking at him having about 2 years left before he kind of hits that age 30 apex, which shouldn't matter for a guy like Hollywood Brown because this is just a stash video. This isn't buying an elite level asset. Getting a guy like Hollywood Brown as my first level stash is something that I would be looking to do if I were you. My second dynasty stash that you should have before the NFL draft, it is going to be Dallas Goedert. And Dallas Goedert has been all the talk and all the trade rumors that the Philadelphia Eagles are either looking to trade him away or get a better player at the tight end landscape. We talked and I've heard, hey, maybe they might be interested in a guy like Kyle Pitts. And for a guy like Dallas Goedert, I understand the value hasn't been there as you're looking at a run-first team with Jalen Hurts, with Saquon Barkley. You also see A.J. Brown get added in next to Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert is the clear number 3 in this offense. And this last year, only 10.4 fantasy points per game, put him as the tight end 10. The year before that, tight end 12. Back in 2022, 11.8 fantasy points per game, put him as the tight end 5. And I understand when you're kind of talking about him just being a middle and tight end, you're like, Caleb, do I really want to be buying into a guy like Dallas Goedert, who is 30 years old, but hasn't had that elite level ceiling of a guy like a Zach Ertz, who a lot of people were excited when Dallas Goedert replaced Zach Ertz as the number 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Never really happened in the tight end landscape for him. But if he were to enter and go onto a new team, I think we'd see Dallas Goedert's value absolutely skyrocket because, like we said, right now he's tight end 23 on keep trade cut, going behind guys in the tight end landscape like a Ben Sinnott, like a Travis Kelce, a Brenton Strange. I do think Travis Kelce is pretty undervalued, actually, to be honest. So is Travis Kelce kind of a stash right now? I don't know. I don't think he is, but Dallas Goedert for me, if I need some tight end help, especially if I'm more of a competitive team, we've seen Dallas Goedert have some significant fantasy football value in his career. And if he were to even land on a better situation than the Philadelphia Eagles, I think that's an upside shot that I would like to take because when we're talking same range of an early third, I understand there's players in this early third range every year, a Bucky Irving, a Puka Nacua, who absolutely hit. But getting a guy like a Dallas Goedert, who there's some concerns about his overall production, but I think a lot of people know the consistent reliability that Dallas Goedert does have. That is something that I'm considering that I do want as a stash on the end of my bench. My third stash for the end of your bench ahead of the NFL draft, it is going to be Rachaad White. And I've talked about all offseason how I'm not buying running backs, how I don't want to invest when we have this super elite 2025 rookie running back class coming into the NFL, and they're absolutely going to destroy a bunch of backfields just because of how talented they are, and especially those round 3, round 4, round 5 running backs. There's a lot of depth. And so a guy like Rachaad White, who's sitting as the backup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers behind Bucky Irving, I think has a lot of people scared right now. RB46 on keep trade cut. We've seen his value absolutely continue to crater over these last 6 months. And I understand Bucky Irving looked really great. We're talking about Bucky Irving being a top 7 in a lot of consensus rankings out there. But Rachaad White's a guy that I want to take a shot on because let us not forget RB10 on a points per game basis in 2023. I understand it was not an efficient year with only 3.6 yards per carry. The real reason he got up on that year was because of the 64 receptions that he had. And as much as, cool, he got a ton of receptions, had 9 total touchdowns. If we look at what he did in 2024, it really wasn't that far off. Went from 15.8 in that really great 2023 campaign to last year splitting carries with Bucky Irving, goes down to 12.5 fantasy points per game. So he's the RB23. Still played in 16 games, had almost, his overall rushing attempts cut in half, but he still got 51 receptions, and his yards per carry actually went up. So I understand he didn't have as many receiving yards and didn't have as many receptions, really playing into the fact that that's the reason that he went down. But overall, I mean, still had 9 total touchdowns, less rushing attempts, still got a ton of receptions. But yet his overall value, I mean, when we were talking about Rachaad White last offseason, Rachaad White was sliding in as a top 13, top 14 running back in Dynasty rankings. And now this dude's all the way down at RB46. So I understand them drafting a player could absolutely crater Rachaad White's overall value. I just want a piece of Rachaad White. I think if you can get him super cheap, like we said, this is in the same range as the players we just talked about with Hollywood Brown and Dallas Goedert. You can 100% be trading somewhere in the 3rd round range. And there's running backs who went ahead of him. Like Blake Corum's done nothing in the NFL. It's all been hype since Michigan, and he's going ahead of Rachaad White. Guys behind him like a Ray Davis, a Dylan Sampson, a Javonte Williams, even though he just signed with the Dallas Cowboys. I want a guy in this range who we've seen put up top 15, a guy who even sharing a backfield put up back end RB2 numbers. That's a guy that I want stashed because he's going to have value, especially in the season when we're talking about these running backs. Not saying or wishing anything on Bucky Irving because, knock on wood, it's a wood desk. I have plenty of Bucky Irving shares. I just think Rachaad White, there is upside there, and I understand a player that gets drafted there could crater his value, but I want Rachaad White as my next stash in Dynasty Fantasy Football. My next player that you need to be stashing on the end of your bench, it is going to be Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones is the QB 34 over on Keep Trade Cut. He's going ahead of a guy like a Kirk Cousins, who a lot of people like, but he's going behind guys like an Aaron Rodgers, a Russell Wilson, Joe Milton, a Jalen Milroe. And I understand a lot of people still have faith in Anthony Richardson. I live in Indiana. There's a lot of people that still believe he can be the truth, that he can turn into the Cam Newton, that he can have all the potential that he's going to have. I don't think they bring in a guy like a Daniel Jones if they didn't have any sort of faith that Anthony Richardson couldn't be the guy, because last year people were still calling for Joe Flacco pretty early on in the season. I know Anthony Richardson got hurt. Joe Flacco looked pretty good. Daniel Jones, in my opinion, is better at this point in his career than Joe Flacco, and he can actually rush the ball and provides a lot of what Anthony Richardson has provided up to his point. I mean, let's not remember back in 2022, Daniel Jones put up QB 10 numbers. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is going to win the Indianapolis Colts a Super Bowl, but I do think he can win you a Dynasty Fantasy Football Championship if he is starting. And if you are a super needy quarterback team, he's going to be someone that's super affordable on he's probably not on waivers. Potentially he is because he's overall player 205, but he's going to be super cheap to trade for. We're talking about, a middle to back end third type pick range for a guy like Daniel Jones, who, as much as we're talking about some of these quarterbacks like Quinn Ewers, a lot of people are going to be more excited about Quinn Ewers. Daniel Jones actually has a path to start, and he's one of those quarterbacks that in all of his years playing, even last year in the 10 games that he played, he still rushed for 265 yards. Like, that's, 26 yards per game, essentially. That's almost 2.6 fantasy points, 3 fantasy points per game. If we look back in 2022, he had 708 rushing yards on top of 7 touchdowns. So he is absolutely, I don't want to say he's a Konami quarterback because he's not that electric, but he is pretty electric when he can run, and he's an above average runner at the quarterback position. So as a guy that is looking to constantly get some edge at the end of my bench, Daniel Jones is 100% somebody that I would be continuing to stash as he is the backup for Anthony Richardson and could potentially be the starter. This next guy is super, super deep. So if you're in one more of a shallow league, somewhere like a 10 team, or even potentially a 12 team, this guy's probably on like the cut potential list, depending on your overall league, but I don't think he should be. It's going to be Keaton Mitchell for the Baltimore Ravens. And Keaton Mitchell came into the league undrafted, super big speedster, and really in that first year was kind of a waiver wire darling off of the waiver wire and redraft. Played in 8 games, 47 rush attempts, 396 yards, 9 receptions, 2 total touchdowns, 8.7 fantasy points per game. Played in 8 games, of course, gets hurt in that season. Was kind of sad to see. We see Derrick Henry then get signed last offseason. He's recovering off the injury, comes back in and puts up 1.4 fantasy points in the 5 games that he played. So a lot of people are writing off Keaton Mitchell. A lot of people are saying the Baltimore Ravens are a great landing spot for a running back because they have some good capital, like we said, in that 2nd to 5th round range. And Derrick Henry continues to get older. So whoever is that backup, that's a prime handcuff for Derrick Henry. I still want a piece of Keaton Mitchell. I understand the risks. I understand it's out there. But this dude is essentially free. Like, he is essentially free when we're talking about him in the same range as like a Tootin is going right before him. Austin Eckler is going right behind him at, like I said, RB61 is where he's going. Jaleel McLaughlin, Nick Chubb, Jordan Winnington, Dalton Schultz are some similar level players on KTC. I just want a shot on Keaton Mitchell. I understand you might not be in that same way. You might be like, Caleb, I'd rather take shots on a guy like a Tootin getting a good opportunity. I hear you. But like I said, in that 2023 campaign, when he came in week 9 versus Seattle, 20 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points in week 10, looked absolutely electric. I want a guy that looks electric with the ball in his hands, and I think Keaton Mitchell is this. Now, I'm going to give you 2 bonus stashes. I'm going to give you 2 bonus stashes, and this is going to be a little bit more rapid fire. Next guy is going to be Zach Ertz. Washington Commanders re-signs. He was Jaden Daniels' security blanket. Tight end 34 on keep trade cut. He's pretty low. You'd be looking at trading a late 3rd for him, maybe even an early 4th. And as a guy that plays in a lot of tight end premium leagues, as a guy that likes to compete for championships, that is exactly what Zach Ertz is. I mean, when you're looking at guys going ahead of him, Hunter Henry, Fannin, Dalton Schultz right now on keep trade cut, Jawan Johnson behind him, I mean, Zach Ertz is going to outperform all those guys. Now, is Zach Ertz maybe a season away from, dynasty grave status, the elephant graveyard? For sure. But if you're looking at this as a 1-year opportunity, that late 3rd, that early 4th, the odds of it hitting are super low. I understand you might find Bucky Irving. I understand you got a 1 in 12 shot there at that pick of absolutely hitting gold. But why not just hit gold in your tight end spot, especially if you're like a guy like me that doesn't have an elite tight end on most of his dynasty rosters? Go get a guy like a Zach Ertz. The next player that you need to be targeting, and this is my final stash, it's going to be Kareem Hunt for the Kansas City Chiefs. Gets that re-signed, 29 years old, about to hit that RB30 age cliff. Everyone's concerned. Everyone's worried. I might be different and not feel like how you guys feel, but I don't think Isaiah Pacheco is an absolute killer. And because Isaiah Pacheco is not an absolute killer, Kareem Hunt, I think, has value. I understand they could draft somebody. I do think the Chiefs need to draft somebody. Let's be clear, though. The Chiefs drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire pretty high. That didn't necessarily work out. Kareem Hunt wasn't bad last year. RB26 on a points per game basis. Definitely won me a lot of weeks when Isaiah Pacheco was out. And I don't think if we're looking at his overall, body of work, that I understand he's getting up there in mileage on both the bodies and on a carry standpoint. Last year, 3.6 yards per carry. He hasn't eclipsed 4 yards per carry over the last 3 seasons, so definitely showing a lot of age, lacking a bit of explosion, but he still runs really, really hard. And if you need to take some shots on running backs, I do think a guy like a Kareem Hunt, like we said, with one of those late thirds, early fourths that you might have, he's 100% worthy of a stash. So if you like Dynasty Fantasy Football, if you like winning, hit that like and subscribe button. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. A lot more video content to come during the NFL draft season. We're going to help you win your rookie drafts. So tune in right here on the DLF YouTube channel, and I will see you here soon. Bye.